My name is Linnell, and I crossed over some time ago into the interdimensional physical existence that is still very much here in our world and our reality. We are within this very physical existence, but within another manifested, formed expression. And within that as well, we're no more existing as the personalities, as the mind that defined us within this world and this reality, along with the human beings that was within our world and our reality. Because within our very living in this world, with the human beings that become our world, our basic social network, and that's both the good people and the bad people and everyone in between, becomes our total self-definition of our mind. I mean, they are the very parts throughout our lives from which we've drawn who we are within ourselves. And so when you die, you're completely disconnected from that total system outside yourself and inside yourself, because none of those relationships or interactions are there anymore for you to be able to exist, which is quite interesting. So when you die, what remains is the point or the experience, the nature, the presence of your actual, natural, original beingness that existed within and throughout time, of being within existence as a whole. So remember, in terms of the history of existence, where we were beings manifested into the mind consciousness systems, into the physical, and eventually lost that very beingness through time being and going into all the processes of reincarnation, where we basically started layering ourselves, our beingness, through the mind and the physical and the lives in the past. And so throughout all that time, basically all that remains is just maybe one point or one experience, as one essence of yourself, and that's what remains when you cross over. And the name that we choose, for example, in terms of being in existence, we don't necessarily require to have names, because we recognize each other based on our signatures of our beingness, in our very presence of who we are as those points. So the name is simply a sound expression of the being, and so I chose the now because that very much resonates, if you will, with me in my expression. So therefore, even now when we cross over, there isn't anything left of who we were here on earth. And the moment I crossed over, the only thing that I experienced as me, as the presence, was like this softness. I don't know if you've experienced caring before. I mean, you feel caring, it's but real caring. It's like this experience that softens your total physical body for a moment and takes you into a depth within yourself and your human physical body. And it is so soft and deep in its expression that everything silences within yourself, and it's like, feels like you want to cry, but you don't. So that was like the experience that crossed over as me in how I experienced myself only as that, and everything else was darkness. And then what emerged from within me was existence as a whole. And within existence as a whole was literally a manifested representation, or even the actuality of existence in the earth, the universe, humanity. Everything as it is here now emerged from within me. And within that, I was taken back in time to my life on earth from birth, and all the processes, experiences, and relationships, and all of it, again, not from the mind consciousness system perspective in what I believed or perceived or had an idea about who I am and everyone else is and this world is and humanity is and existence is. No, from the perspective of the reality, the actuality, the real nature of who I was as a human being in this world, in this reality. And what I could see within that was, like, for example, my thoughts, my reactions, how I developed my personalities, how I created myself as a mind within this world and this reality is what I saw. And so I could see my participation within my world and my relationships and all the outflow consequences that it created throughout my life, not only for me, but for everything and everyone. So I walked a basic life review of me in my total experience in this world and on earth, and seeing the very detail of what I accepted and allowed. And within and during this whole process, which is the most significant point that I came across that was the most difficult for me to face during this life review, was my tendency to gossip. And there's going to be many beings coming through the portal and sharing a point within their life review that they had found the most difficult with walking through in their processes of facing themselves, as I faced myself throughout my life in the interdimensions as I crossed over. Because within walking in that process of one's life review, one have an opportunity to stand equal to and one with oneself and one's life experience, and within that take responsibility, and within that responsibility make the decision to change self in participating with existence as a whole, in walking one's process within existence. Obviously not in a life on earth, but in a life here within how we are assisting and supporting ourselves and being equal to and one with ourselves as the physical and each other, which is equal and one, the exact same process human beings on earth is walking. However, it is obviously not necessary to die to have to do that. And one will, for example, see how much more simpler it is to in fact walk your process here than within the interdimensions, even still, because your responsibility is so great within the interdimensions, meaning so vast that the point of dying is actually a consequence and not a gift. The very gift is that you are breathing, and within breath within walking this life with breath, slowing yourself down, and simply making decisions that consider not only yourself but all as one as equal, will change your total self and life in walking the required process to get yourself out of that mind as separation and into really living here. So death from that perspective is still a consequence, because even with us walking in the interdimensions and being equal to and one with the physical, that whole process that you as human beings are walking or will be walking as the actual birth from the physical as real living, we won't experience, because that process can only happen in the real, actual physical. What we will do and become is simply facilitating, assisting and supporting that very process for you to be able to walk that for yourself in living breath, in walking process. So that is at the moment the consequence of death, seeing the process of life being birthed, but not in fact being a part of that process for real, because that can only happen with self as an individual in the human physical body, as you are that center point of existence as a whole in the very physical where that happens. So even that point within our life review has to be faced, meaning, can you stand and walk through your consequence in being only now that point that assists and support other human beings or other beings' processes? And many beings within existence, quite interestingly enough, that cross over, face and walk the process of self-forgiveness in realizing the consequence, not from a perspective of it being bad or taking it personally in terms of now wanting to not exist, but realize that it is simply a consequence, and what our process will be in assisting and supporting ourselves into equality and oneness with the physical, with what is here from a self perspective, will assist and support other human beings as parts of ourselves to assist and support themselves with the process of birthing life from the physical. And therefore within that, it is awesome to be still part of everything. But the real nature, the real manifestation, the real emergence of life will happen through the physical, through human beings that's here on earth. So with me, with my life review, and we'll bring beings through that face that point as their most difficult point to face, in realizing the consequences of dying. So another being will come through that, found, for example, that point really difficult. And we're going to be doing these interviews to assist and support you in your processes, so that you can have a look at the nature of how the mind works through actual examples, beings that's walked it themselves, so that it will become more easier for you to walk yourself out of it and into self-equality and oneness, so you don't have to go through time as experiences to realize these things, but to simply walk it within yourself in quantum time, and so quantifying your process, and not only yours, but that of everyone else. So gossip. This primarily happened when I was, now as I was walking my life review, you can kind of see your timeline in your physical development. So when I was about 14, this nature of gossiping started manifesting. And it's quite interesting, because in the very gossiping, I experienced, like in my human physical body, the center of my human physical body, like constricting, becoming harder, more tensed, and within that there was a vibration, and that vibration was experienced like an anxiety but an adrenaline at the same time. And within that, it placed the focus of me within my human physical body, like in the upper section of my human physical body, within the chest, neck and head area, which gave me the experience of being uplifted or heightened, and my shoulders went more backwards and my chest protruded more, and my whole physical changed into a stance. Even my chin was slightly elevated upward, and gave me this whole experience of being in power, or like in charge. It's more the word, like in charge, like I'm in charge. And the words that would come out in the conversation of gossiping with my circle of friends was always within the context of especially other women and guys, in like speaking about their looks and their appearances and their work ethic, and how they were presenting themselves, and what they were eating, and who they were in relationship with, and your basic materialistic gossiping tendencies of just observing and looking at and watching human beings. And obviously it was really, even at that young age, quite nasty stuff, meaning where especially with the other girls that was not in our group, we'd primarily like gossip about their appearance, and or how ugly they are, or how overweight they are, or how can that girl be in the relationship with that guy, and how can that guy like that girl, look at what she's wearing, look at her skin, look at her eyes, look at her legs, it's so disformed, and she's not pretty, and she's just sucking up to the teachers, or things like that. And the guys as well, the nature of the gossip in terms of, again, appearance, even going so far as talking about the parents. And he was so ugly, his parents didn't love him enough to make proper or give him proper clothes, or he probably never showers because he belongs in the gutters, and things like that. I mean, pretty bad stuff came up. And in the nature of 14-year-old girls, this nature of gossip is generally accepted as a normal means of communication between such groups of people. But what happened is, the more and more I participated in it, the more and more that initial adrenaline anxiety experience that made me feel in charge, like I'm part of something, became more and more and more intense. And eventually it went from just communication to constant thinking, and from constant thinking to actual action and behavior, where as time passed, I literally became this absolute snob in my relationships with other human beings, in where my very thinking, my thought patterns towards other human beings would always be within and along those lines, where even to my best friends, my family, everything and everyone that was initially close to me, this nature of gossip would come up in my back chat and my internal conversations and my experience. And it got so extensive within me that my very behavior toward even my family and my best friends became within that in charge, powered, initial experience that started growing and growing and growing within me, where my total position towards my relationships with everything and everyone came about me being the most important and you being just a lapdog, and you will do how I want it, as I say, and I will define my relationship with you according to how I want, how I decide. So I went into this total God complex manifestation with everyone in my world and reality. I mean, it was like starting to get like non-stop in how nasty the things could be that can come up in my mind towards other people. And I mean, it could be even the littlest things, like a person's eye might be slightly less open than the other one, and my mind would just rush with all these images of these disformed and disfigured images and people and manifestations from stories, storybooks, magazines, and then I would actually liken this person to all of that and make fun of them in my mind. And outwardly, I mean, I would look like this really perfect person and lady, and always in the trends, in the fashion and physical appearance, presentation, smile, niceness. But within me, I really was a nasty bitch in the evil that could come up towards people. For example, there'd be a crease on a man's pants, and I would go into this total internal conversation about how this man's house is looking, and it was probably be an absolute mess. And then I go into looking at all the problems and defects that is on him or his human physical body, how he's eating, and then from there it'll expand even more. And then I'll think about movies about eating, in how men eat barbarically and as pigs, and I'll just see this man as a total asshole. And I mean, it was like insane how we take one little thing and then just look for problems, look for defects, look for something wrong within other human beings. And that became my life. And what was most interesting in terms of what happened is I could not have real, actual, effective relationships, like, at all. I mean, I felt always so alone, so sad, so empty, and so dirty within me. And it was a constant experience. And outside, I mean, I really looked perfect. I had the perfect skin, the perfect hair, the perfect clothes, the perfect behavior, mannerisms, everything. I knew what to say, how to say it, how to be, when to be, everything. But within me, it really felt like dirty laundry shit. And it became exhausting to every single day hold this within me and my world. And eventually it led to a nervous breakdown, and I had a nervous breakdown and an emotional feeling trauma experience, and I just dropped and fell, and I couldn't get out of it, and I went into this extensive depression. And then I didn't have anyone to take care of me, because I had actually created such fucked up relationships throughout my world that no one really in fact cared. And then I started seeing what everyone else was in fact thinking and experiencing towards me in my relationship with them, in how they saw me as the very thing that I was accepting and allowing myself to be and live. And then eventually I got into a mental institution because I just didn't want to do anything. I just shut down. It's like everything just stopped. And from there, I eventually got out and I killed myself. And it was quite a life experience in terms of that we do not consider ever what it is that we're really in fact doing within ourselves. Like with, for example, I mean, I was 14, I was gossiping. What's gossiping? You know, among friends. And we think that what's going on inside ourselves we're doing to other human beings, because that's what it felt like for me as we were gossiping, as I was speaking in my mind, in the thoughts and the internal conversations and my behavior, that what I'm doing inside myself, I'm doing to other human beings, but everything I was in fact doing to myself, inside myself, and all that shit that I was thinking, that I was having back chats about, that was coming up inside me, my reactions, my very behavior and mannerism inside me that I was living out as that gossip was festering, building and accumulating inside me, where I had taken the very life, the very living, the very substance, the very real physical relationships with other human beings to discover, explore, experience and realize myself. I completely removed, became non-existent, because everything within me just became that primal point of separation and gossip. And so I was in fact within that just diminishing myself and my life, my living. And I mean, even having relationships like with males was a complete fuck up, because sex was so horrible. I mean, I just couldn't have sex because my mind would simply just race with all these thoughts and images and ideas and backchat, and it just felt like this human physical body was just fucking me in my human physical body, and I didn't have any actual real sexual experience. Because I mean, when you're so far gone in your mind in terms of an instant relationship towards another human being within that context, you're completely separated from your human physical body, and to the extent where you cannot even experience a mind orgasm within enduring sex. So my relationships then simply became the whole flirting and catching and having sex in terms of it being the required prescribed norm to be able to have something to talk about with the circle of friends. Obviously everything made up in terms of I have to maintain a profile within my game as my life with all my pawns in the system, and so I just have the sex to be able to have a reference for me to talk about how it was and what I experienced and things like that. And I'd hear people speak about orgasms, and so it would just be easy to kind of formulate how an orgasm would be experienced and kind of just make it up in my mind. And therefore my whole world became a total mind experience, an absolute lie. And everything accumulated in me because I had no one to talk to. I had no real relationships. I didn't know how to communicate with other human beings because all my communication was happening in my mind. Actually having a full-on intimate communication with another human being was never there. I mean, I couldn't because of the nature of the relationship I'd already established within my mind toward them. And so everything just bolts and bolts and bolts in my human physical body. And then everything within my mind, my physical, was so overloaded with all the layers, with all the memories, with everything, that my mind just shut down and just kind of went, this is enough. Because I didn't stop me. And if I have a look at it, that didn't happen, I mean, I would have probably gone insane a lot faster, but from a perspective of just possessing, being possessed and just losing it within even being able to harm other human beings. So from that perspective, my mind consciousness system actually assisted and supported me. Like, hey, you're not getting yourself out of this. You're not seeing what you're accepting and allowing. Shut down. Bye-bye. You can go and leave this world. So, obviously, I had to walk the consequences of that shutdown. I mean, we're not going to have a merciful exit from this world and this reality where the mind is just going to go put itself off and have you die. No, I had to walk, it took 5 years for me to walk from that shutdown, that nervous breakdown, through my whole experience within the depression, from the mental institution out into, obviously, getting myself into that state of killing myself. Because even in that state, you have your natural survival mechanism of not killing yourself. And then eventually did it with pills, which within itself was quite a horrid death. Experiencing the very detail of your total human physical dying. I mean, you're drinking pills. It's like little parts of your human physical body shut down one by one by one by one. And the multidimensional manifestation of the complexity of your human physical body, when you die like that, becomes like quite a revelation in terms of the complexity of the very physical design. So everything shuts down one by one by one. And you have to be there with that body busy dying, and you're experiencing it going slowly but surely, and the whole body cleanses and goes into this extensive amount of pain. And you've got these various different poles doing various different things in how your body is shutting down, and it was a nightmare. So, and all of that could have been stopped if I had just taken the initial responsibility of seeing what I was accepting and allowing to happen within my mind towards other human beings. I mean, I knew it wasn't right, meaning it wasn't right from the perspective of, this is really shitty. Because after I'd done that, gossiped, and then this person would come into my world and help me with something, and they would be really nice, and I would really feel like shit in terms of what I was speaking about them, because in their personhood, who they were actually cool beings. But I felt so ashamed and like so angry within myself in what I was actually saying towards them, that instead of facing it inside myself, asking forgiveness, I went into protection mode, and thus went into ego and treated them like shit, which is how I was in fact experiencing myself. And so I made sure I kept them separate from my world to not have to face the real nature of what I experienced towards them when I actually met them. I mean, they were, in their very beingness, nice. They were cool beings. If I had just not gossiped and spoken all that shit, I'm sure we would have had a cool relationship. But I didn't take that initial point of responsibility, just that one point of forgiving myself and realizing and being honest about what I was experiencing in myself. It was shitty. It was bad. I felt angry. I felt just really not cool. And instead of just coming to terms with that and asking the being for forgiveness to correct that point and not being afraid of what the consequences might be of forgiving me and for asking the other for forgiveness, my whole life would have been different, and I would have still been here having that opportunity to really understand what it means to live. So, for all those that gossip, remember this point in what it is that you're really missing in this world. Is your opportunity to live, is your opportunity to experience yourself, is your opportunity to expand, to learn, to develop you with other human beings. That is in fact parts of ourselves through which we will expand, develop and grow and learn. I mean, don't limit your friendships or your relationships based on what your mind or your thoughts or your back chat or your reactions are saying. First, get to know people. I mean, the ones that we may resist the most may be the very ones that you need to get to know to expand, learn, grow, and live. Just as it was with me, the very ones I was attacking in my mind were actually the real beings that would have made my experience of me in this world so much more. And within that, if you do gossip, and if you are gossiping, simply stop and realize what you're busy doing is separating yourself not only from others, but from you. Because you're busy developing your mind, your thoughts, and your back chat into such a way that you're not going to be able to have effective relationships with other human beings. And that's really going to compromise yourself, because other human beings are parts of yourself. This process is walked with other beings. You cannot walk it alone, because human beings are individual, separated parts of ourselves. It's through human beings that we're going to bring ourselves back to ourselves in realizing ourselves. So the more you expand the amount of people you're participating with, the more you'll start facing things that is in fact inside yourself, and can so quantify your own process. And within that, to then forgive yourself for the gossiping. I would even go so far as every single person that you've gossiped about, apply the self-forgiveness, and then move with them, interact with them to test if your self-forgiveness has been effective, to establish a relationship with that person, and you may see, realize, and understand how that person will become or may be an important point within your life experience. I mean, I can't say that in terms of your own life and what it is that you must face, live, or experience, but take from what I have lived through and experienced. And this is a very definitive, obvious point in how gossip manifests us into real evil and compromises not others, but only oneself. Okay, and so stop the gossip. Establish a functional, effective self-relationship with you, and so with others in your world and your reality. Don't get to know others based on what you think of them. Get to know others based on who they are. Thank you very much. Into the physical, and eventually lost that very beingness through time being and going into all the processes of reincarnation, where we basically started layering ourselves, our beingness, through the mind and the physical and the lives in the past. And so throughout all that time, basically all that remains is just maybe one point or one experience, as one essence of yourself, and that's what remains when you cross over. And the name that we choose, for example, in terms of being in existence, we don't necessarily require to have names, because we recognize each other based on our signatures of our beingness, in our very presence of who we are as those points. So the name is simply a sound expression of the being, and so I chose the now because that very much resonates, if you will, with me in my expression. So therefore, even now when we cross over, there isn't Hi, my name is Linnell, and I crossed over some time ago into the interdimensional physical existence that is still very much here in our world and our reality. We are within this very physical existence, but within another manifested, formed expression. And within that as well, we're no more existing as the personalities, as the mind that defined us within this world and this reality, along with the human beings that was within our world and our reality. Because within our very living in this world, anything left of who we were here on earth. And the moment I crossed over, the only thing that I experienced as me, as the presence, was like this softness. I don't know if you've experienced caring before. I mean, you feel caring, but real caring. It's like this experience that softens your total physical body for a moment and takes you into a depth within yourself and your human physical body. And it is so soft and deep in its expression that everything silences within yourself, and it's like, it feels like you want to cry, but you don't. So that was like the experience that crossed over as me in how I experienced myself only as that, and everything else was darkness. And then what emerged with the human beings that become our world, our basic social network, and that's both the good people and the bad people and everyone in between, becomes our total self-definition of our mind. I mean, they are the very parts throughout our lives from which we've drawn who we are within ourselves. And so when you die, you're completely disconnected from that total system outside yourself and inside yourself, because none of those relationships or interactions are there anymore for you to be able to exist, which is quite interesting. So when you die, what remains is the point or the experience, the nature, the presence of your actual, natural, original beingness that existed within and throughout time, of being within existence as a whole. So remember, in terms of the history of existence, where we were beings manifested into the mind consciousness, from within me was existence as a whole. And within existence as a whole was literally a manifested representation, or even the actuality of existence in the earth, the universe, humanity. Everything as it is here now emerged from within me. And within that, I was taken back in time to my life on earth, from birth, and all the processes, experiences, and relationships, and all of it, again, not from the mind consciousness system perspective in what I believed or perceived or had an idea about who I am and everyone else is and this world is and humanity is and existence is. No, from the perspective of the reality, the actuality, the real nature of who I was as a human being in this world, in this reality. And